Let me ask you a question. So you're having your annual review at work, and your supervisor says to you, well, you're really content. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Here's another one. This week at the Super Bowl, at one of the press conferences, someone says to Peyton, they say, would you be content if your career ended without you winning this upcoming Super Bowl? And he said, I'd be content. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Of all the virtues that we talk about in church, I think contentment might be the most difficult for us to grasp. And there's a reason for it, because we all want it. I mean, who doesn't want contentment? We all want it, but we don't want to admit it. Because there's something in our culture that says if you're content, there's something wrong with you. I think one of the basic problems we have as Christians, especially in our country, is that we confuse the biblical definition of contentment with our cultural one. Now, there's a key passage in the Bible that talks about contentment. It's found in Philippians. It's a letter that was written to a church in Philippi, which was a city in the Roman Empire. Now, that church was Paul's primary support church. They basically funded his travels and his missionary work, his work to spread the gospel. And so really the way to think about Philippians is to think about it as being a letter to the donors, an update and a thank you letter for their support of his ministry. And so realize too that when he wrote this, he was writing from a jail, not an American jail. Think more about the kind of jail you might find in a third world country. Very dark, very brutal. There was no ACLU or prison ministry outreach to come along and say, hey, the conditions here don't hold standards. No, this is a Roman jail, a horrible place to live. So realize that he wrote these words from those conditions. So look at chapter 4 in Philippians, verse 10. I rejoice greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had had no opportunity to show it. They had sent him an offering. They'd sent him some money and a letter, I think. Now, I'm not saying this because I'm in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. So he's saying, I'm content in this circumstance, in this prison. I'm content because I've learned something. So he had some kind of aha moment where he learned to be content. Now, here's what he goes on to say. I know what it's like to be in need. I know what it's like to have plenty. Again, I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry. And then this coffee mug verse. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. I mean, that's the one we want on our bookmark. That's the one that we'll put on our shirts. That's the one that goes on the bumper. I can do all things through Christ who gives me the strength. And that's a great verse, and we love the message. But I think we make a mistake with this verse in our culture. We don't read it in context. We think it's like some kind of like a promise that we can do whatever we want to do if we just believe in God. That's why we think it's cool when football players put pH 413 on their under eye grease, because we are just sure that God has a vested interest in him throwing 3 touchdowns that day, and his team and his owner and his organization winning the game against that other team. I can do anything with his strength. I can even throw 3 touchdown passes today because of the strength that he gives me. Now, Paul is not saying in pH 413, I will be amazingly successful and accomplished because I believe in God. Because again, look at the context. He is not hoping to get a new NFL contract when he wrote that. He is in a stinking prison. He is likely sitting in his own feces. He is chained to a wall and a soldier. He is being fed rodent-infested stale bread, more than likely. He is surrounded by thugs, and he is saying, look, I've learned something. I've learned I can be content even here in this place. I've learned the secret. A better translation might even be, I have grasped what it means. I have had a moment of understanding that lets me accept this. You know, for a couple of months now, we've been watching the structure go up out here on the west side of the building. And, you know, for like 2 months, it looks like nothing's getting done. You go out, you walk out week after week, and go, wow, are they ever going to do anything around here? Yeah, I get a little impatient because you don't see it. I mean, they're deconstructing, they're tearing stuff up. It's, you know, they had to break it down so they could build something better. So that's my method with you today. I'm going to break something down, and then we're going to see if we can build it back up. And what we're breaking down is this word contentment, so that we can understand how we can learn how it works. Okay? So there are 3 things that biblical contentment is not. The first is it's not happiness. Now, you can be happy, and most people, when they're content, are happy. But that's not what the word means. I hope you have a good share of happiness. I wish that for you. But Paul is not saying, I'm happy to be in this stink hole. I'm happy to be in this situation. I'm happy to be in this location with the lowest dregs of society, eating the slop and living in this. It just makes me giddy to be in a Roman prison. No, that's not what he's saying. I think we're sometimes led to believe that we are to be happy in every situation we're in. Like even Christians kind of put this on each other. Well, you just need to be happy that you're, what, really? I mean, unemployment? I mean, who's happy about that? I mean, you can fake it, but who can be happy about this is just the greatest. I can't find a job. I can't pay my bills, and I feel like I have a third eyeball when I go for an interview. I'm just real happy about that. Marriage. I just love being married to a drunk who can't hold a job and won't raise my kids. Thank you, Jesus. Give me more of that. No. Oh, I'm just so happy I have cancer. Chemo, radiation, bloating, diarrhea, hair loss. Give me more of that. No. Paul had learned to be content, but he wasn't always happy with his situation. I have a bunch of references that I'm throwing at you, but I can't read all these because they're way too long. One is 2 Corinthians 12. And if you read that, you will see that Paul struggled and was not happy with a situation that had been thrust into his life. He had something called a thorn in the flesh. We think it was a physical ailment. We don't know for sure. But he says, I begged God 3 times to take that away from me. Now, you don't beg God to take something away from you if you're happy with it. But he said, I learned that his sufficiency is greater than my weakness. Right? Jesus gives us an example in the Garden of Gethsemane, a great example of this. And I think you probably know a little bit about it. It was right before he was crucified. He went to the garden to pray, and he was in agony. He was in anguish, deep anguish. And it says that he prayed not once, but 3 times. Lord, if there is any way you can remove what's about to happen from me, if you can take that cup from me, I would be happy for that. But then, of course, we know he also said this, what? Not my will, but yours be done. See, that's contentment, but it certainly wasn't happiness. And so, I like something there that we miss. That he prayed boldly, but he accepted humbly. And God help us that we could all do that. Now, so contentment is not equal to happiness, although happiness and contentment certainly are linked. It's also not a lack of drive. I mean, sometimes you just think, well, a person doesn't have dreams or great ambition because they're content. Paul had great ambition. He had great drive. Again, another passage you could read this week, 2 Corinthians 9, chapter 20, 27. It shows he's incredibly driven. He was intense. I think he was probably type A. He'd probably be the kind of guy who'd be hard to work with, always pushing. Always had something new that we had to do, you know. There's nothing wrong if your ambition is there and if you're driven, if your drive is there. But also we have to realize that we're wired differently, and that some people are wired to plan the race. Some people are wired to run in the race. Some of you are. And some are wired like me to watch it unfold. I love to watch it, but I don't want to plan it and I don't want to run in it, right? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And it doesn't mean you're not driven. But are you driven by God? That's a question. Because that's really what we're looking at in this word of contentment. What drives me? What drives you? So contentment is not blind happiness. It's not lack of drive, and it's not laziness, on the other hand. The Bible never nods at us and says, hey, you can be lazy. You can just slide through life. As a matter of fact, it frowns against it, and it talks a lot about it. One place is in Proverbs chapter 24, verses 34 through 34. And here's what Solomon writes. He says, I went past the field of a sluggard. Sluggard is a biblical name for a lazy person. It's not very flattering, is it? Sluggard. Past the vineyard of someone who has no sense. Thorns had come up everywhere. The ground was covered with weeds. The stone wall was in ruins. So it shows this situation where everything had fallen apart because of a sluggard. I applied my heart to what I observed, and I learned the lesson from what I saw: a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a thief, and scarcity like an armed bandit. And the summary of that is, if you've learned to be lazy, you better like being poor. That's what that means. So in the whole of Scripture, the Bible does not defend laziness. So we see this. The contentment isn't laziness. It certainly doesn't mean that I have blind happiness or that I have a lack of drive. So what is it? Let's go back to Philippians chapter 4, verse 10. Paul says, I know what it's like to be in need. I know what it's like to have all that I want, to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and all circumstances, whether well-fed or hungry. And then that key statement that we like to put on our mug, I can lean on Christ. I know what it is because I have Him who gives me the strength. So 3 things about contentment. First of all, it's coping with what is and accepting what can't be changed. So it's coping with what is. It's whether I have a lot or I have a little, whether I'm well-fed or I'm hungry, whether I'm chained or I'm unchained, I accept that. As a matter of fact, contentment means self-sufficient regardless of circumstances. I liked how Taylor put it earlier. He had a great statement about it. So if I have unemployment, if I'm married to Marge or Homer Simpson, if I have cancer, that doesn't determine who I am. If I have a rich season in life and my coffers are full, if I have a lean period in life where I don't have much, I'm just not faithless and fatalistic about that. And it's not because of some pump-up book that I read from, I'm going to sneeze, Jason. Thank you. Jason hates it when I right in his, he's pulling off the ear. That guy, I'm going to get him. But it's not about, it's not some book I read from some guru that, he's got it all together because it looks like he's got money and power and all that. And so, therefore, I'm content because I'm going to have all the stuff that he talks about. No, I get content when I plug into God. Paul says this, that it's learned. It's not acquired, it's learned. Look at Colossians 3:17. This is a great verse. This is one you might want to put on your eye grease. This is one you might want to put on your coffee mug, right? It says this, whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. I mean, this is a command of how Christ-ins are to live our life. And what does that mean? It means that whatever I do it in representation of Jesus himself. I'm going to talk about this later. So doing things in his name means that I live my days asking, how can I face today walking with him in this day? Practically, in the midst of a situation you hate, you can even say, Lord, how can I represent you in this circumstance? Could be in your parenting situation that seems hopeless. It could be in a workplace that seems futile. Everyone here can do this. We can ask, Lord, how can I represent you in this situation? I am here today, so how can I represent you here today? You know, in Paul's case, he wanted out, but he also knew that because he was in chains and in a Roman prison, that he had this great opportunity that was pretty rare. Every day, day in and day out, Roman soldiers were coming into his cell, and they were surrounding his cell, and he had an opportunity to make an impact on those people. And you know what we learn about the history of Christianity? We know that in Rome specifically, that the power of Christianity rose out of the military. Well, hey, did Paul know that when he was in a stinking jail, that that's how it was going to work out? Nobody took the opportunity, and look what happened. How can I represent the Lord? So why is contentment so elusive? Well, there's several reasons. One is human nature. I mean, there's a couple things that all Christians, all people struggle with, and one is comparison. And I bet a lot of you are just like me in this. There are so many things I never thought I needed until you got one. I wish you'd stop doing that. You know, if you didn't have one, I wouldn't need one. You got a smartphone? I had to get a smartphone. I'm a dumb guy with a smartphone, but I still got one. It's more for comedy relief for Taylor and all of his friends, me having a smartphone. I was so happy till you showed up with yours. The problem's you. You got something newer, you got something bigger, you got something better, you got something grander, you got something more. Contentment will never be found in the pursuit of bigger, better, or more of anything or anyone. And that goes with another word that creates this problem, that's greed. I mean, they really go together, greed and comparison, because the more I get of it, the more I want of it. And so you start seeing nicer things and you start loving nicer things. And the only way I know of breaking the cycle of comparison and greed in my life is to be generous. I mean, the Bible shows us that. Generosity turns our hearts toward the pursuit of God rather than toward the pursuit of things. And so we're not afraid to talk about stewardship in our church because we know that when we are generous, it changes us toward God's way of thinking and God's way of loving and God's way of doing. And so if you want to break the control that greed and that comparison have in your life, start giving and see what happens. Now here's another reason that contentment's so elusive. It's our American culture. You hear the phrase consumer-driven, and we are. And you know, don't you, that every commercial that you watch during the Super Bowl when the Magic Rainbow Stallions play in that game is, you know what's going to happen is that all that is just to give you an appetite for something that they want you to buy, right? You know that. You think it's just entertainment. No, they want you to buy something. And we are driven by that. We have such a love affair with having the next and the more. But it even goes beyond that. It goes to achievement. That's why the Donald resonates with so many Americans. He is the achievement candidate, hearkening in our desire for greatness and superiority. And we do have an appetite for greatness and superiority. And Americans are famous for that. Now here's another thing that creates this discontentment in our lives. It's unrealistic dreams and goals. We live in the culture of the ideal. There's the perfect job out there somewhere waiting for me. There's the perfect marriage. If I can just get out of this one, I'll find it somewhere. It's the ideal home. Love it or list it, right? Even worse, we live in a culture of false encouragement. If there's 8 teams in the tournament, every team gets a trophy, every kid comes home with a medal. Being this culture of encouragement doesn't sound bad until I realize that I'm not telling the truth sometimes. I'm trying to make some little kid think he's going to be in the NBA, and he is probably not going to be in the NBA, right? We get that gets lost in this. Everyone passes. Everybody makes the team. Everybody gets to play the same amount of minutes. Everybody gets the winner's medal, even if they lost all their games. But the realization is that I'm not cut out for something, and that's going to hit someday. Someday I'm going to hear probably the hard way. I'm going to learn that lesson. I'm not made up for that. I had guys in my preaching classes in college, and they could put together a 3-point sermon that sounded pretty good, but they were so socially awkward they couldn't make 2 friends. Well, those guys weren't going to go lead a church somewhere. I'm just telling you right now. But you know what? For 4 years, they had people telling them, probably me too, hey, you're doing a great job, man. You can do it. I think in Christianity, we're pretty big on that, and we should be encouraging, but not in a false way. You don't want to be the guy that's the dream stealer, right? Like some guy says, hey, you think I'm going to make it in ministry? Young guys come to me, hey, I want to go into ministry. Really? You? I mean, did you realize that being in ministry doesn't consist of not knowing what a washing machine is and playing Call of Duty number 47 for the rest of your life? I mean, because there's something to this. But we don't want to break it to them. I'll say, I'll pray for you, guys. I'll pray for you. Whatever. The sad part of our culture is because we believe people who encouraged us for something, in fact, they were just saying, look, I don't want to tell you the truth because I don't want to be the one that bursts your dream bubble. Romans 12:3 is a verse that all of us should consider putting on our mugs, T-shirts, and under eye makeup. Here's what it says. For by the grace given me, I say to every one of you, do not think more highly than you ought of yourself, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment, in accordance, listen to this, in accordance with the faith God has distributed to each of you. Now that would change a lot of things. Me embracing who I am and what I'm honestly capable of, me embracing reality. So how do I get contentment? How do I keep it? That's really what we want to know. Paul said he learned it. It will be a lifetime lesson for us. It really will. But how do I learn it? Well, I think it's as simple as making these simple shifts. First of all, I change what I can, and I accept what I can't. If I can change it, I change it. You should pray about all things. But if it's out of your control, you say, God, here that is. I have no control over that. If there's a treatment, seek the treatment. If there's a job out there you're better suited for, pursue the job. If your marriage needs a boost, get some counseling. Go to Weekend to Remember. You'll grow, you'll learn. But I have to be honest about my circumstances before I can really let God help me with that circumstance, which here's at least the second thing. Treat every situation as a special assignment from God. Wake up asking God, how can I bring glory to you today? Now please understand this, especially if you're in a miserable situation. Jesus makes it clear that we are on an adjusted time delivery system. One day at a time. Today this is Celebrate Recovery Sunday. Every fifth Sunday, Celebrate Recovery comes and they serve us. They serve at the doors. They're great ministry. But those folks know this better than anyone else, that you don't want to presume past today, one day at a time. And we should all live our lives that way. Seek His ways, His kingdom first today. He says, if I do that, He'll give me what I need. We'll be just fine if we let Him have today. Paul isn't telling Christians that they should dream bigger dreams. It's rather that we should endure the crushing feeling of defeat of those dreams aren't realized. He's not encouraging us to go out and conquer the world at this point. He's saying that we can press on when the world conquers us. Jesus can and will give us what we actually need: strength to survive our moments of weakness, even in life's prisons. Now go write that under your eyes. God, we come to this moment of remembering your greatest defeat and our greatest victory. Well, actually, it was your greatest glory and our greatest victory. And everybody on that day said, He's whipped. Well, they beat Him, where they showed Him where He belongs. They put Him where He can no longer make those claims. Look at Him now. And we looked, we watched, and you showed us that in maybe the most unhappy moment in the history of mankind, you were content. And if you can do that, we can follow you. So today, as we commune, we remember you, and we also think about how you want to change our lives and what you want us to write on our under eyes and put on our coffee mugs and on our bumpers. And that is that we can do anything with Christ who gives us the strength. Amen.